My name is Marlowe Ashby, and I was 31 years old the morning my father sent me a text that said, "There's a table by the side entrance. It's just family overflow. Don't make this difficult." I read it twice. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. Then I made myself a cup of coffee and stood at the window for a long time, watching the neighbor's dog chase something through the yard. My sister's wedding was in 11 days. I had been coordinating vendors for 8 months. I had a folder on my laptop with 42 email threads, 19 signed contracts, and a running total that had crossed $28,000 roughly 6 weeks earlier. All of it on my card, all of it in my name. My father didn't know that. Or maybe he did, and decided it didn't change anything. What I did next, and what happened in that reception hall on a Saturday afternoon in front of 214 people, my sister's new in-laws included, is something my family is still trying to explain away. They haven't found the right words yet. Welcome back to channel, where quiet people finally close the account. If you've been here before, you already know how this goes. Drop a comment below, and if you're new, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. I grew up the middle child in a family that had a very clear hierarchy, and I was never at the top of it. My younger sister Dara was the one my parents talked about at dinner parties. She had the kind of looks that made strangers say she could model, and she knew how to walk into a room and fill it up without seeming to try. My older brother Colt was the one my dad called the steady one. He worked in commercial real estate, lived 20 minutes from my parents, and had dinner with them every Sunday, without being asked. I was the one who lived 45 minutes away, worked in supply chain logistics for a mid-sized manufacturing company, and had been described at various family gatherings as the organized one, which was the version of a compliment my family gave when they couldn't think of anything warmer. I was fine with that. I had been fine with it for a long time. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of Millhaven, kept a vegetable garden on the back patio that I tended badly and loved anyway, and spent most of my weekends either hiking the Reservoir Trail or visiting my grandmother, Nana Bet, who lived in an assisted living community called Birchwood Crossing about 12 miles from my apartment. Nana Bet was the person in my family who understood me. She was 81 years old, sharp as a letter opener, and she had a habit of watching you very carefully before she said anything. When she finally spoke, she said exactly what she meant, not cruelly, just precisely. She had grown up without much and had built a life through a combination of stubbornness and patience, and she respected those qualities in other people. She told me once, sitting in the small courtyard at Birchwood while the evening came in cool off the hills, that I was the only person in the family who remembered to ask questions and then actually listened to the answer. I told her I learned it from her. She patted my hand and said, "Then keep doing it. It's rarer than you think." I had worked in logistics for 9 years by the time Dara got engaged. I managed vendor relationships for a living, contracts, timelines, cost negotiations, escalation protocols. I was good at it. My manager had told me twice in the last 3 years that I had a specific talent for making complicated things look easy, which was a way of saying I did a great deal of invisible work and it mostly showed up only when it didn't happen. I was not, by anyone's measure, the glamorous one. I wore sensible shoes to work and kept a backup blazer on a hook behind my office door. My car was a 7-year-old Subaru with 94,000 miles on it and a crack in the dashboard from a summer I'd left a water bottle in direct sun. I had a savings account that I added to every month without fail, and a checking account I kept lean, and a line of credit I had never used because I had never needed to. That changed when Dara got engaged to a man named Prescott Hale. Prescott's family was from the eastern side of the state, old money, or the version of old money that doesn't talk about old money but makes sure you notice the house. His mother, Marguerite Hale, wore jewelry the way some people wear armor, and the first time I met her at the engagement dinner, she looked at me the way you look at a room that's been recently cleaned, politely, briefly, with no particular interest. Dara had wanted a wedding that matched what she imagined Marguerite expected. That was how she phrased it to me, what she imagined Marguerite expected, which told me everything I needed to know about how the next year was going to go. My parents offered to fund what they could. My father was semi-retired and my mother had gone part-time at the dental office, where she'd worked for 20 years. They had some savings, but not the kind of savings Dara's vision required. The first budget my sister put together, and I saw it because she sent it to me directly and asked what I thought, came in at just under $70,000. My parents could cover roughly half of that. Prescott's family had agreed to contribute toward the rehearsal dinner and the honeymoon. There was a gap. Dara asked me if I could help bridge it. I said yes. Not because I was asked warmly or because the request came with much gratitude attached. I said yes because I loved my sister and because I had the money and because I believed at the time that this was what families did for each other. They filled the gaps. I put $32,000 onto a line of credit I opened specifically for this purpose, and I began making deposits and signing contracts. 8 months later, I had 19 signed agreements in my name. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the videographer, the cake baker, the DJ, the rental company for linens and chairs, the lighting designer, the hair and makeup team, the shuttle service, the parking coordinator, the hotel room block coordinator, the ceremony musician, the officiant's administrative office, the rehearsal dinner venue, and 3 smaller vendor contracts for favors, signage, and day of coordination. I had also paid deposits totaling $28,000, with the final balances due in installments over the remaining 11 days before the wedding. My name was on every contract. My card was on file with every vendor. If anyone needed to reach the person responsible for this event, they called or emailed me. This was not a secret I kept deliberately. It had simply evolved that way because I was the one who knew how to do it and no one else was available or inclined to learn. My mother knew I was coordinating. She thanked me periodically in a way that suggested she thought of it as administrative help rather than financial underwriting. My father knew less. Dara knew everything. She had seen every contract, approved every vendor, and sent me the first deposit request herself. What none of them seemed to have processed fully was the operational reality of what my name on those contracts actually meant. I found that out 11 days before the wedding, when my father sent me that text. The text arrived on a Thursday morning at 7:14 a.m. I was standing in my kitchen in socks, waiting for the coffee to finish, when my phone lit up with my father's name. There's a table by the side entrance. It's just family overflow. Don't make this difficult. I read it 3 times. I turned the phone over. I poured my coffee. I stood at the window for a while, as I said. Then I picked the phone back up and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Did you see Dad's text?" I asked. There was a pause, not long, maybe 2 seconds, but the kind of 2 seconds that has weight to it. "Marlowe," she said, "your sister has a very specific vision for the reception. The immediate family table is going to be small. It's just the 4 of us and Prescott's parents. We want it to look a certain way." "I'm not asking to sit at the immediate family table," I said. "I'm asking not to sit in the parking lot." "It's not the parking lot," she said. "It's the courtyard annex. It's actually a lovely space." I had been to the venue. The courtyard annex was a covered patio with a view of the side parking structure. It was where they put the overflow. It was fine for overflow. I was not overflow. "Mom," I said, "I've been coordinating this wedding for 8 months. "We know," she said, "and we're so grateful. You've been so helpful. But the seating is really Dara's decision, and she has a lot of pressure right now, and we're trying not to add to it." I understood, in that moment, what was happening. The Hales were going to be at the head table. The inner family circle, the one that would look correct in the photographs Marguerite Hale would eventually frame and hang in her hallway, was going to be a specific shape. And I did not fit the shape. Not because of anything I had done. Because of what I was. The organized one. The logistics one. The one who was useful behind the scenes and less useful in the frame. I told my mother I understood and I got off the phone. I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and opened the vendor folder. I did not call Dara that day. I had learned over 31 years that conversations with Dara when she was in a high-pressure period were not conversations so much as performances, and I was not in the mood to perform. I waited. She called me 2 days later. Saturday afternoon. She was at a fitting and her voice had that particular quality it got when she was managing several things at once, and didn't want to admit any of them were difficult. "So I heard you talk to Mom," she said. "I did. I just want you to know the seating situation is not about you. It's about optics. Prescott's family has very specific expectations, and Mom and Dad want the main table to look a certain way. It's not a value judgment. It is a little bit of value judgment, I said. Marlowe. She said my name the way you say a word, when you're tired of it. I really need you to not make this a thing. I need this week to go smoothly. Can you just be the person you always are? The one who handles things without needing anything back. I heard what she was asking. She was asking me to be invisible, not just physically in the courtyard annex, but categorically, to handle and not to need, to give and not to receive, to be the kind of presence that holds a day together without appearing in any of its photographs. I told her I understood, and I did understand. I understood very clearly. The following Monday, I had 3 separate phone calls with vendors, the florist confirming a change to the centerpiece order, the caterer confirming a final headcount, and the venue coordinator checking in on the day of timeline. All 3 of them, at some point in the conversation, used some version of the phrase "just wanted to confirm with you" as the contact on the account. I confirmed everything. On Tuesday, I had a longer call with the venue coordinator, a steady and efficient woman named Clara Voss, who had been the day-of-point person since we'd signed a contract 6 months earlier. We walked through the run-of-show, the vendor arrival schedule, the parking logistics, the catering changeover between cocktail hour and reception. She mentioned, almost in passing, that the final venue balance of $11,400 was due by Friday. She asked me to confirm the card on file was still good. I told her it was. I did not tell her anything else. On Wednesday evening, I drove out to Birchwood Crossing and had dinner with Nana Bet. We had pasta from the community kitchen and a glass of wine she kept in a small refrigerator under her writing desk. She asked about the wedding. I told her about the text. She set down her fork. She looked at me for a moment. "Does your sister know what's actually holding that day together?" she asked. "She knows," I said. "She's chosen not to think about it." Nana Bet picked her fork back up. "People forget what they find convenient to forget," she said. "Until they can't anymore." I drove home that night with the windows down and the radio off. On Thursday, 7 days before the wedding, I received a group text. It was from my mother, addressed to Colt and Dara and me. It said, "Seating chart is finalized. So excited. Marlowe, you're in the annex with the Whitmore cousins and some of Prescott's college friends. Should be fun." Smiling face with smiling eyes. There was a seating diagram attached. I opened it. I found my name. I was at a table labeled Annex B, next to a woman I had never met and across from 2 names I didn't recognize. Colt had replied with a thumbs up. Dara had replied with a heart. I put my phone in my bag and went to work. The wedding was on a Saturday. The ceremony was at a chapel 20 minutes from the reception venue, and it was genuinely beautiful. Old stone, high windows, afternoon light coming in warm and sideways. I sat in the 3rd row on the bride's side, next to my aunt and her husband. My mother had not reserved me a seat in the first 2 rows. I had not expected her to. Dara came down the aisle in a dress she had chosen after 6 fittings, and she was radiant in the specific way that brides are radiant, not because of the dress or the flowers, but because the whole room had organized itself around wanting her to be. I watched her and felt something go quiet and complicated in my chest that I didn't try to name. Prescott cried a little at the altar. I thought better of him for it. The ceremony lasted 40 minutes. Afterward, there was a cocktail hour on the chapel lawn while guests filtered to cars for the drive to the venue. I drove myself. The venue was a converted estate property on the edge of town, a main house with a ballroom, an outdoor terrace for cocktails, and the courtyard annex where my table was waiting. I had been inside this building 14 times over the past 8 months. I knew where the service entrance was, which bathroom ran out of paper towels first, and that the freight elevator was faster than the main one when you were moving equipment. I walked in through the main entrance, found my coat check, and went to the terrace. My mother was already there, standing with Marguerite Hale and a woman I recognized as Prescott's aunt. My mother was in a pale blue dress and her hair was done, and she looked the way she always looked at events she had been preparing for, slightly assembled, slightly performing, trying to make everything cohere. She saw me and waved. Not warmly, the way you wave at someone you're glad to see, briefly, the way you wave at someone you're glad to have accounted for. Marguerite Hale turned. She looked at me the way she had at the engagement dinner, That same brief, polite assessment. Then Clara Voss appeared at my elbow. Clara was in a black blazer and headset, clipboard under one arm, moving the way good event coordinators move, purposefully without appearing hurried. She had come from the direction of the main doors, which meant she had been watching for arrivals. She looked at me, and something in her expression shifted. Not alarm, but that particular focus of a professional who has spent months in email correspondence with one person and is now, for the first time, placing them in the room. "Ms. Ashby," she said, "I was hoping to catch you before the reception started. We have a small change to the final payment timeline. Our finance office is asking to confirm the card authorization before we open the bar at 6. It should only take 2 minutes." My mother heard this. I saw it in the way her chin moved, just slightly. The way her eyes cut sideways toward Marguerite. Marguerite heard it too. "Of course," I said to Clara. "Whenever you're ready." We walked inside. At the main doors, my father was standing with Prescott's father, a tall man named Edmund Hale, who had the bearing of someone who had given many speeches and expected all of them to be listened to. They were talking about something real estate adjacent. My father saw me come in with Clara and paused mid-sentence. Something moved across his face. It was not quite recognition. It was more like the beginning of a calculation he hadn't expected to have to make. I smiled at him, not widely, just enough. Clara and I went to the event coordinator's office just off the main hall, and she confirmed the card authorization. She was professional and brief. When she closed her file, she said, quietly, "We really appreciate how smoothly this process has been. You're one of the most organized clients we've had." I thanked her. We walked back out. The reception began at 6. The room was exactly what I had spent 8 months building. The linens in the deep ivory my sister had chosen, the centerpieces with the garden roses, and the trailing greenery I had negotiated a 15% discount on by agreeing to use their house stock for the accent flowers, the lighting warm and directional, the band set up at the far end with the floor clear for dancing. It was beautiful. I had made it beautiful. No one at that table, not the guests, not my family, not the Hales, had any particular reason to know that, except that they were about to. The dinner service had been running for about 40 minutes when it happened. The head table was set on a low riser at the front of the room. My parents, Dara and Prescott, Prescott's parents, Prescott's sister, and her husband. Marguerite Hale was at the center, next to Edmund. I was at Annex B, near the side entrance, with 3 of Prescott's college friends and 2 cousins I had met once at a family reunion 6 years ago. The food was good. The conversation was polite. I had a glass of wine and kept my phone in my bag. Then Edmund Hale stood up. He was not a man who needed to signal that he was about to speak. The room simply adjusted to him, the way rooms adjust to people who have spent decades expecting them to. He held his glass and looked at the table and then out at the room, and he began to speak about his son. He talked about Prescott for a few minutes, his character, his work, the specific quality of his loyalty, the pride they had in the man he'd become. Then he turned to Dara's family. When Prescott told us he wanted to marry Dara, Edmund said, "Marguerite and I asked one question. What is her family like?" He smiled. "We've had several months now to find out. And what I can tell you is that this family builds things quietly and well. This evening," and here he gestured slightly at the room, "is evidence of that." He paused. "I'd like to acknowledge, specifically, whoever was responsible for the coordination of this event, because I've attended a great many weddings, and I have not attended one that ran this smoothly." Marguerite made a point this afternoon to say the same thing. So, with the groom's family's gratitude, whoever that person is deserves to be acknowledged. He looked at the head table. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at Dara. Dara looked at her hands. Clara Voss was standing near the kitchen entrance, and she had heard the speech. She was not the kind of person who stepped into moments unnecessarily. She was the kind of person who understood her job precisely. She had spent 8 months in correspondence with one person on this event. She looked at the head table. She looked at Annex B. And then she walked to Annex B. She stopped at my chair. She said, clearly enough that the table heard it and the table nearest to us heard it, "Mr. Hale, I can answer that. The coordination and funding for this event was managed by Ms. Marlowe Ashby." She's been our primary contact since last October. Edmund Hale looked at me. The room, or the portion of it near enough to hear, shifted. My father's face did something I had never seen it do. It went very still, not peaceful, but the particular stillness of a person who has just understood something and is deciding what to do with it. His jaw did not move. His hands on the table did not move. Something in his chest seemed to recalculate. My mother's chin went up and then came down. Her hand found her water glass without her eyes moving to find it. Marguerite Hale turned in her chair, a full, deliberate turn, and looked at me for the third time. But it was not the assessment from the engagement dinner or the cocktail hour. It was something different. Her head tilted, almost imperceptibly. She picked up her glass. Dar was looking at the centerpiece. Edmund Hale raised his glass toward Anne Ashby and said, with what sounded like genuine warmth, "Miss Ashby, our thanks." I raised mine back. I said, "I hope you enjoy the evening." And that was all I said. I set my glass down. I picked up my fork. I finished my dinner. The next 48 hours were interesting. That same evening, before the dancing started, Marguerite Hale made her way to Anne Ashby. She didn't send someone. She came herself, in her armored jewelry and her composure, and she sat down in the empty chair next to mine and said, "I'm told you work in supply chain logistics." "I do," I said. "Edmund's company has been looking for someone to manage vendor relationships for a new regional facility. Would you be open to a conversation?" I told her I would. She gave me her card, a real one, heavy stock, just her name and a phone number and an email, and went back to the main table. I put the card in my bag next to my phone. My father found me near the end of the night, when the band was playing and most of the room was on the dance floor. He was holding a glass of something he hadn't touched much of, and he looked older than he had that morning. He said, "I didn't know the whole picture." "I know," I said. "Your mother thought. We thought you were helping coordinate. We didn't understand the financial piece." "I know," I said again. He looked at me for a moment. He said, "That was a lot to take on." "It was," I said. He didn't apologize. Not that night. I didn't expect him to. My father was not a man who apologized quickly. He was a man who processed things slowly and alone, and if an apology came, it came later, in a smaller moment, with less witness. I understood that about him. I had always understood it. I hugged him, briefly, and went to find my coat. The Sunday after the wedding, Dara called me. She had not called the night before. "I want to say I'm sorry," she said, and her voice had a quality I recognized, slightly thin, slightly effortful, the voice of someone who has been awake since early morning working up to a call. "I knew what you were carrying, and I let you sit at Anne Ashby anyway. That wasn't right." "No," I said. "It wasn't. I think I convinced myself that you would just handle it. The way you handle everything. I told myself you wouldn't mind." "I did mind," I said. "I know." A pause. "Did the Hales say anything to you?" I told her about Marguerite's conversation. Dara was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you going to take the meeting?" "I'm thinking about it," I said. She said, "I'm proud of you." I should have said that more. She said it carefully, like someone placing something fragile on a surface, checking to see if it would hold. I told her I appreciated it. 3 weeks after the wedding, I got an email from Edmund Hale's office confirming the details of an informational meeting. I went. It lasted an hour and 15 minutes. Edmund Hale asked very specific questions and listened to the answers, which I had come to believe was the most reliable indicator of whether a professional relationship would be worth having. I was offered a consulting contract 2 weeks later. The terms were better than I had expected. My mother, for her part, called me 4 days after the wedding and left a voicemail that lasted almost 6 minutes. She talked about the seating and the assumption they had made and the way she had framed my contribution to herself, and she said she had been wrong, and she said it more than once, and by the end of the voicemail, she was crying in a way that she would have been embarrassed by if she'd realized the phone was still recording. I listened to it twice. Then I called her back. We talked for a long time. Not about the wedding, specifically about the pattern under the wedding, about the 31 years of me being the organized one, and what that had cost, and what it had looked like from the inside. It was not an easy conversation. It was also the most honest conversation we had had in years, maybe ever. My mother is not a bad person. She is a person who learned, somewhere early, to organize her children by utility, and she never fully examined that habit. Examining it at 63 is hard. She was trying. I told her I would keep trying too. Colt texted me a week after the wedding.
Hey.
Heard what happened. I didn't know about the money. That was a lot. You good? I told him I was good. He sent back a thumbs up, which was Colt's version of a speech. I appreciated it. About 2 months later, Dara and Prescott had the Hales over for a dinner in their new apartment, and they invited me. Marguerite Hale was at the table and she asked me, specifically, about the consulting contract and how I was finding the work. We talked for most of the meal. My father was there too. At one point he caught my eye across the table, and he gave me a look that had something in it I didn't have a word for, something between apology and recognition, the kind of look that tries to say something it hasn't figured out how to say aloud yet. I nodded at him. He nodded back. We are not a family that heals in large gestures. We are a family that heals in small ones. A phone call that runs long, a dinner invitation, a look across a table.
I have made my peace with that.
Not because I stopped wanting the larger gestures, but because I decided that waiting for them was not a project I was willing to keep funding. Some things you build. Some things you finally let other people carry. I went home that night and fed my vegetable garden, which had, against all expectations, produced a genuinely good crop of tomatoes that summer. I picked 3 of them, sliced them, ate them standing at the kitchen counter with olive oil and salt, and did not feel the need to tell anyone about it. It was a good evening. I have had quite a few of those since. My grandmother told me once that the most expensive thing you can give a person is your invisibility. She meant that when you do the work and ask for nothing back, when you hold a thing together from the inside, without a name on the frame, you are making a choice. You are choosing to be the foundation rather than the facade. And foundations, she said, are only missed when they crack. I cracked a little, not loudly, just enough for the light to get in. That was enough. That's my story. A parking lot seat assignment, a room full of vendor contracts, and one moment when a coordinator stopped at my table and said my name aloud. Those 3 things changed the shape of my family. Not overnight, but permanently. Here's what I keep thinking about. When Edmund Hale stood up and asked who was responsible for the evening, there was a moment, maybe 5 seconds, when anyone at the head table could have spoken up. My mother could have said our daughter Marlowe. My father could have said it. Dara could have said it. None of them did. So, I want to ask you, if you had been at that table and you knew, would you have said something? Would you have claimed the person who built the day, even if claiming her complicated the picture you were trying to present? I genuinely don't know what the right answer is. I think about it. Drop your answer in the comments. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.